Okay, guys, welcome to part 2 of our learning styles. So, part 1 is learning theories, and this time we're going to talk about learning styles. So, learning styles and cognitive styles are the habitual manners in which learners perceive and or receive and perceive information, process it, understand it, value it, store it, and recall it. So, basically, paano ba tayo natututo? Okay, the way a person processes, internalizes, studies, interprets, and changes new and challenging material. So, how are we gathering new information and storing it in our brains? So, you have your different learning models. You have your memletic learning style. You have your done and done learning style. And you have your Kolb's learning style. So, starting with the memletic learning style model, it recognizes that each of us prefers to learn in different ways. Some of us are visual, logical, social, solitary, verbal, oral, and physical. So basically, sinasabi ng memletic learning styles that we have different learning styles or we prefer to learn in different ways. And based on the anatomy of the brain, you have these different sites of the brain which are a lot more developed in other people. So sometimes a certain part of the brain is a lot more developed, in which case what sense that part of the brain is responsible in is actually the preferred learning style of the person. So, depende po yun sa development ng utak natin. Okay, so you have your learning style over here. You have your spatial or your visual, which means you prefer to see things bago nating matutunan or bago natin siya ma-retain. So, you prefer using pictures, images, graphs, charts, puzzles, and spatial understanding. So, basically, kapag sinabi nating visual, ginagamit natin yung mata natin. And then next is you have your oral or your auditory musical, which means you prefer sound and music. You have your verbal, which is linguistic or otherwise known as your linguistic, wherein you prefer words, both in speech and in writing. So basically, sinusulat na yung mga sulat at saka yung mga sinasabi sa inyo. So these are more on the lecture or traditional lecture type of learning. And then you have your physical or kinesthetic, which means mas prefer mo na ginagawa yung mga bagay na matututunan mo. So basically, this is your practical learners. Before you learn something, gawin mo muna. Okay? So you prefer using your body, hands, and sense of touch. Next, you have your logical or mathematical learning style, which means you prefer logical reasoning, problem solving, systems, step-by-step processes, and so on and so forth. So, basically, nagkakaroon tayo ng systems. And then sa social learning naman, this is interpersonal, which prefers to learn in groups or with other people. So, ito yung mahilig sa group studies. Okay? Yung group study talaga, hindi po yung group study na sleepover. So, hindi po ganon. Next, you have your solitary, which is interpersonal, prefers to work alone and use self-study. So, ito naman yung mga gusto. Kapag nag-aaral sila, naka-lock yung kwarto, naka-high yung music, basically ayaw nila nang naiistorbo sila kapag sila ay nag-aaral. Next, we have done and done learning style model. So most people can learn and each individual has his own unique ways of mastering new and difficult subject matter. So, ibig sabihin lahat daw tayo kayang matuto, pero iba-iba daw tayo ng level of mastery depending on the subject matter. Okay, so done and done learning model, meron tayong mga elements na tinatawag. You have your stimuli also. So you have your environmental elements or you have your environmental stimuli, which basically consist of sound, light, temperature, seating design, your table design, yung ergonomics pa ng setup mo. Next, you have your emotional elements, which is motivation, conformity or responsibility, task persistence, and structure. Next, sociological elements, it could be either alone, by pair, by peers, by group, by authority, or by variety. So, depende po sa atin yung done and done learning style. Basically, sinasabi po dito that we have our different styles in mastering our learning. So, pwede tayong matuto lahat, but we have different styles of learning. Yung iba, gusto nilang i-master to the environment. Yung iba, gusto nilang i-master when they are motivated. Yung iba gusto nilang i-master when they are alone when they are with pairs, or when they are with peers. So, depende po yan sa atin kung paano natin siya i-master. Okay, so environmental, some people, example lang, some people uh, tend to study in a cool and quiet room while others cannot focus unless they are playing music, which is correct. 'Di ba? Yung iba gusto tahimik lang, pero most of us, or rather ako personally, I'm a learner who likes the noise. So ako gusto ko na naririnig ko yung ingay ng mga kaklase ko, gusto ko na naririnig ko yung discussions nila because by their discussions, doon din ako natututo. Next, emotional. Some people work best when motivated and encouraged, while some feel motivated when assigned to lead and assume responsibility. So, meron naman tayong mga tao that is maganda yung trabaho nila when they are motivated, and sometimes yung trabaho yung nagiging motivation nila. So, depende po sa tao. Next, sociological. A number of people need to work alone when tackling a new and difficult subject, while others learn best while working with colleagues. I personally, contrary to what I said earlier na gusto ko yung ingay, I prefer to learn a new subject matter alone. So gusto ko mina-master ko muna sa sarili ko, and once I have mastered it a few times, or once I've known what these things are, tsaka ko siya i-share sa mga classmates ko. Next is physiological. Some people prefer to study at night, accomplishing more in a quiet environment, while some find it easier in the morning. Ako personally, I like studying. If ever I have tasks to do, I do it in the midnight. So gusto ko kasi after midnight kasi tulog na lahat ng tao. And also, wala nang pumipigil sa akin sa mga nilalaro kong online games habang nag-aaral ako. Okay, next is psychological. So global learners prefer to work in an environment with soft lighting and informal seating, while analytic learners prefer to work in an environment with bright lighting and formal seating. So basically, kapag sinabi po natin global learners, sila yung medyo chill. Ayun yung mga gusto nag-aaral sa Starbucks, gusto nila because they have your soft lighting, which ideal for working. You have your informal seating, which means kahit saan ka lang umupo, okay lang. But then you have your analytic learners, which prefer to work in an environment which is structured. Yung mga mahilig sa library, sa mga study rooms, yung mga mahilig, may sariling setup sa bahay, these are analytic learners. Okay? Next, we have Kolb's learning style. So it depicts learning as a four-stage cycle, beginning with an intermediate concrete experience during which the person makes observations and reflections. Then the person develops an abstract theory from which he or she develops ideas on how to proceed. And finally, the person actively experiments with actions to test them out. So the four stages are social or accommodating, creative or diverging, intellectual or assimilating, and practical or converging. So basically, tandaan lang po natin si Kolb's learning style, meron po siyang stages. Okay, so basically, perception muna tayo. Hahanapin muna natin observations and reflections. And then we have abstract theory. So titignan na natin or tatanong na natin kung ano ba itong mga experiences na to, ano ba itong mga observations na to. And then we're going to experiment. Okay, so this is your four stages. You have your reflective observation, you have your abstract conceptualization, you have your active experimentation, and you have your concrete experience. Okay, so Kolb then hypothesized that learners need four abilities to be effective. So concrete experience abilities, learning from actual experience, which is sa totoo lang, sa course natin or sa program natin, sa profession natin, this is very true. Kasi kapag meron tayong concrete experience, we tend to retain more of what we learned instead of just theories. Di ba? Kaya nga, meron tayong argument about paano naman yung mga skill-based courses or programs? Paano tayo mag-work from home o mag-learn from home kung wala tayong skills na nagagawa? Okay, so you have to have concrete experience. That is also the reason why whenever we send people, we allow people to graduate, they have to have completed their full internship rotation because they have to have concrete experience. Next, they have to have reflective observation abilities, which is learning by observing others. Kailangan daw, marunong kayong matuto sa ibang mga tao. Bakit? Very important na natututo tayo sa mga experiences ng ibang tao, especially when we have seniors. Yung mga seniors natin, guys, they're very experienced, they're very respected, they're very decorated in the field. So kapag ino-observe natin sila, the mere fact that we are working with them is already a learning experience. Next is abstract conceptualization. So creating theories to explain what is seen. Kapag sinabi natin abstract conceptualization, meron kang nakita, tapos gusto mong ipaliwanag. Pero hindi mo pa sigurado kung yung paliwanag mo ay tama ba. So basically, we're just trying to explain kung ano ba yung nakikita natin. And finally, active experimentation. We apply our theories to solve problems. You also have the different types of learners. You have your social accommodator learners, which are leaders. They learn best by analyzing and solving problems as a group using their own intuition and information from other people rather than from books and lectures. So ito yung mga guys mahilig sa group studies. And they look for new experiences, often take risks, and employ hands-on methods to accomplish their goals. They actively accomplish things using trial and error methods to solve problems, and they may be impatient with other people and act on intuition and are a risk taker. Okay, kapag social or accommodator yung learner natin, they tend to want to be in groups. Gusto nila kasali sila sa grupo because that group is what's going to help them learn. Next are creative or diverger learners. These are very imaginative. They have an open mind to new ideas and offer multiple perspectives. So these are their brainstormers, yung maraming ideas. They value brainstorming, like I mentioned, with a group, although they often listen and observe, sharing their own ideas. Bakit? Kasi habang nakikinig po tayo, guys, habang nakikinig tayo sa learning, or habang nakikinig tayo sa mga kaklase natin, we develop new ideas. Diba? That's one of the reasons why kapag may professor na nagde-discuss and nagtatanong sa inyo, minsan hindi kayo makaisip ng question muna. Diba? But once your classmate ask a question, tuloy-tuloy na yun. Kapag may nagsimula ng question and answer portion, tuloy-tuloy na yung questions. Okay? Because from their questions, nakakaisip kayo ng mga pwede pang itanong. Next, they rely on concrete examples to learn and trust their own feelings when making decisions. They excel in imagination and awareness of meaning. They are feeling oriented and people oriented and likes working in groups. So unlike your social learners, yung social learners natin, they're a bit controlling. So dito naman, creative and diverger learners value the feeling and the people around them. Next, intellectual or assimilator learners are organized and precise. So these are the logical learners. They like to learn from lectures, reading, and contemplation. So these are your visual or your written learners. They find facts, ideas, and information fascinating and challenging to people and emotions. More scientific than artistic. Their strengths are in inducive reasoning, creating theoretical models, and integrating ideas. They prefer playing with ideas and actively and applying it. And they are more concerned with ideas than with people. I have to admit that this perhaps is what I would most identify with because I like learning in a logical and precise manner. I like lectures, reading, not so much reading, but I do like contemplation. I value facts, ideas, information, and I am more scientific than artistic. In fact, I also always admit that I'm very bad at performing arts. I'm very bad at drawing. I'm very bad at coloring. So I'm not very good at those kinds of things. But when it comes to scientific information, when it comes to logical reasoning, I do quite excel a bit more than my artistic side. Okay, so I do, ako personally, I identify to this or I relate to this kind of learner. Next, you have your practical or converger learners are both thinkers and doers. Sorry. They are those who learn through experimentation, seeking out new ideas and discovering practical applications for them. So these are your doers, or these are your kinesthetic learners. They can focus intently on selected subjects. They favor technical challenges to interpersonal matters. They are goal oriented and make decisions easily. So these are decision makers. And they are good at decision making and problem solving and likes dealing with technical work rather than interpersonal relationships. And these are the problem solvers. Next is matching learning styles to instruction. So some studies have shown increased levels of student achievement when learners with a strong preference for a certain learning style are matched with a similar teaching or testing style. So basically, you have to match, or it's best to match the learning style of the student with the teaching style of the teacher. So some studies have shown that more student satisfaction when the teacher matches the student's learning style, but some have not. Unfortunately, guys, I would have to tell you though that in a population of a very diverse university, such as Our Lady of Fatima University, it's very difficult to generalize the learning styles of students. Why? This is a challenge for professors because we are an inclusive university, meaning we do not discriminate our students, or we do not discriminate in accepting our students. That is part of the reason why it's very hard to reach each and every one of our students, because our teaching style could be a match for half of the students and be a mismatch for the other half. So that poses a challenge, and that is one of the challenges that we most likely want to overcome. And I hope you understand your professors, because your professors have these concrete teaching styles that are fit for others and not, unfortunately, for others. And that would mean that you would have to at least adjust your learning style a little bit to your professor, because, again, for us teaching students, it's very hard to adjust our learning style to fit each and every one of our students, and that would be that is something that you and us have to live with. Okay, so I hope you learned something new, and I hope you've discovered your learning style. um, just take note that these learning styles are not concrete, meaning they could be you could be a mixture of all of these learning styles. You could be a visual and at the same time an auditory learner. You don't have to pick one or the other. So a lot of things in our world is like that, but is all often misconceived as either or. But sometimes, actually, most of the time, it could be both. It could be and not or. Okay, so you could be a combination of all of these.